I think, VC has been built up as the holy grail of what you need as a founder. And I think we need to kind of get founders to understand that that's not the case.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders. From purpose-led entrepreneurs to world-class investors and Olympians, you'll learn firsthand from today's successful leaders on what it takes to be brilliant, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by Hannah Leach, partner at Houghton Street Ventures, the venture fund in partnership with the London School of Economics. Hannah is also co-founder of VentureESG, the community-based non-profit organisation from VCs for VCs to support the ecosystem with meaningful ESG integration. Prior to joining Houghton Street Ventures, Hannah had worked in and around the venture and entrepreneurial ecosystems her whole career, including building accelerator programs, teams within Scaleups, and starting a company or two. I am really looking forward to diving into Hannah's career to date, hearing all about the brilliant work she's doing at Houghton Street and VentureESG, plus talking more about ESG in venture as a whole. So, Hannah, welcome to 40-Minute Mentor. It's lovely to see you again. We've known each other for a few years, so this is really exciting. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for having me. I've listened and watched a lot of your interviews to date, and obviously we have known each other a long time. So it's nice to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure really is all mine. Well, you will know that we like to start with some quick fire questions just to get you warmed up and for our audience to get to know you a bit better. So please finish the following sentences after me. Number 1, the deal I am most proud of is
Binstar, which is tackling the e-commerce returns problem in the US, founded by 2 LSE alums. They're tackling it in a really unique way. Lots of platforms we've seen are software solutions to the e-commerce returns problem. So, that age-old thing of buying 5 pairs of jeans, only keeping 1 and sending 4 back is creating a lot of disasters for the world and the planet. And these guys are setting up a unique model around discount stores or bin stores in launching in Massachusetts, but then expanding across the US. So really excited to be on their journey.
Awesome. I wish I would have invested in
Scan.com. You might know Charlie Bullock. He is another LSE alum. He is his second business. He launched a marketplace for MRIs, but is also looking at the long term and building B2B infrastructure, connecting all kind of stakeholders in their value chain. He's just fantastic, like an amazing entrepreneur, really humble, just an amazing operator and super personable. Expanded into the US. Like we met him when we didn't have a fund, so we weren't able to invest, but we've been on his journey for a long time and have kind of closely in touch. So he's a good one to look out for in the future.
Yeah, what a cool business. Thank you for sharing. A myth I'd like to bust about VC is?
I think maybe this isn't a myth about VC. I think lots of people think that VC is the only way to fund your business. We get lots of startups coming to us and you look at them and you say, well, actually, VC is not the right model for you. I think, VC has been built up as the holy grail of what you need as a founder. And I think we need to kind of get founders to understand that that's not the case. And that's not like where glory lies.
That is so true. And great to hear a VC investor saying that as well. I think there are other avenues. And I think particularly in this climate, I think it's really, really important to talk about those. So thank you very much for making that point. The hardest thing about being in VC is?
It's doing everything. And obviously, like, VCs aren't homogenous, right? Like I always say this, like, I'm an emerging manager setting up our own fund. I'm not someone who's working at Atomico, like a big firm. Like building a fund from the ground up is building a business. It's really hard. Like it's operationally hard. There are so many things you have to do, which is actually why I love it. But it's hard. It's fundraising, like everything is hard. It's all hard, but that's kind of why we do it.
Yeah, I mean, that much more rewarding when you have the wins. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons we wanted to get you on. It's a different story. It's a different experience and like a really exciting and interesting and alternative one to the bigger US funds or whatever. So I can't wait to dig into that. I know there's pain and there's challenges and things that you've had to overcome alongside many wins. So can't wait to explore all of the above. Finally, the one thing I'd like to change about VC is
the notion that there's like a traditional path into VC. that's something I feel quite strongly about. We can talk about this later, but I have quite an atypical background, and I think we need to redefine what it means to be a VC and how a VC is made. And I think in turn that will then lead on to kind of increased capital going to people who don't currently have access to it.
That is a great point. I couldn't agree more, to be honest with you. And I really hope we'll see some of those changes in the industry in the years ahead. But it definitely needs a lot of work, doesn't it? Hannah, thank you. Already touched upon some important and interesting points that we're going to go deeper into over the course of this conversation. But before we get there, tell us a bit about younger Hannah, or Han, as we were saying offline that your brothers call you. Did you always have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit? Tell us a bit about your upbringing and I guess the impact that's had on your career and life today.
Yeah, I think I meant to say that I was always like selling sweets in the schoolyard or something like that, but it's just not the case. I'm like the youngest of three, like two older brothers. My whole family, so my parents and my brothers are both all medical. So I'm definitely the black sheep of the family. I think I wasn't really entrepreneur. I think I was always into people, like interested in people. And also like I did whatever my brothers did, right? Like play football, learn snowboard, skateboard. I wanted to do what they were doing. So like I always like just threw myself into things. And I don't mean to like draw parallels with my like career, but I think I've done a lot of that. Like just I'm not afraid to like throw myself into new things and see how it goes and kind of, fall down on that slope whilst on the skateboard, as it were.
That's really interesting you said that, because it's clear from the variety in your career that that's been the case. That's kind of that theme is carried on. You've worked across lots of different sectors and had lots of interesting challenges. So can you share, for those that don't know your backstory, a bit of an overview of your CV and I guess how those experiences led you to becoming a VC investor?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad in Newcastle in politics, came to London to work in public affairs and kind of lobbying and a little bit of CSR. Got really just didn't enjoy it and wanted to go out to work in India. I'd focused on that a bit in my undergrad, and I'm half Indian. So just kind of got a plane ticket out to India, not knowing anyone, had an internship lined up, found an apartment on Craigslist, which is hilarious. I still can't believe my parents let me do that. And went to work in Mumbai for a big foundation of a bank, doing kind of lots of charity work. We would kind of give grants to small organizations, and then went to work for a rural healthcare organization. I just got really disenchanted with the charity model, the typical charity model. And I was sitting in the same office as Acumen Fund, which is one of the early advocates of investing in entrepreneurs in emerging markets. I loved the idea that you could invest in these entrepreneurs and support them with capital and access to support and services and mentorship. And that was a way to kind of tackle poverty and global problems. So I came to LSE to do my master's in that and fully intended to go back out to India and to work in the sector. And this was the time that fintech was really bubbling up in the UK. And I fell into working for this entrepreneur who was setting up, he'd set up a clean tech business, sold it, had a load of a liquid stock and set up a secondary market, wanted to set up a secondary marketplace. And at the time we were based in level 39 and I met tons of people and I got really exposed to this whole ecosystem and learned about what it meant to start a business and do all the elements of it. So work with the tech team to launch the product and set up the advisory group and fundraise and all of it. Like I got stuck, I used to call myself director of bits and bobs. And of course I thought, right, I can do this myself. So I left a startup, CabPal, which I get relentlessly ribbed about by my family. Uberpool became Uber before Uberpool existed. And that was quite a lonely founder journey. And I didn't really know what I was doing. And I was flailing around in the dark by myself. So someone then said to me, why don't you come and run this accelerator? It was the first master lease accelerator set up by Canary Wharf Group. So working with 36 companies over a 6-month period, helping them kind of devise solutions to implement on the estate. And I loved it, working with founders and building a network and plugging them into the community. And it was kind of everything I enjoyed. And then someone said, time to get a proper job, go to EY. So I went to EY to help set up their fintech team, which again was an experience working in a massive organization, lots of process, lots of structure, lots of bureaucracy, and realized that wasn't really for me. And then left to join 10x Banking, which is being set up by Anthony Jenkins and an old boss, Brad, who's now banked. And again, like fintech, lots of partnerships. Essentially, long story short, I've kind of dabbled around and jumped around and worked in different types of organizations and different types of roles and haven't quite fully found where I fit. But what I realize is that I love building communities. I really see the opportunities in things. And when I got started exploring VCs, it was really the platform role that I was looking at, because I think building out those platform support services, understanding how to support the founders that you're investing in is really critical. And, for the last, maybe that's become prominent in the last 10 years or 5-10 years in the UK, but it wasn't, before then. So that's actually how I got into VC. That was how I entered Houghton Street, and then from there became a partner.
What a story, Hannah. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that, I hope, will inspire a lot of people that listen to this that maybe not on the original path that they thought they'd be, or maybe haven't quite found their way yet, or because the reality is there's not, in this day and age, it's absolutely fine to have a squiggly career. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 moves to work out, to find the thing that you're really passionate about. And I think it's really lovely to hear that you tried lots of different things and then have found something that you're really excited by and passionate about and having lots of success in. So really nice to hear a slightly different sort of career journey. Do you think that squiggly career, was that intentional? Did that happen more organically? It sounded like it was a bit more of just sort of you went with it and just saw where the world took you, but would love to hear your thoughts on that.
It was very organic. It wasn't intentional at the time. I think I was just constantly trying to figure out where I fit. What role did I really enjoy? What was it about something that I wanted to stick with? And I don't love the fact that I've had kind of 10 jobs over the last decade. It's not something like I necessarily champion, but it has got me exposed to lots of different industries, lots of different sectors, lots of different people, and there is a narrative there. I think that's really important, is looking back and looking at what the common thread is. Like, I really love working with people to get ideas off the ground, to do the kind of research and the strategy, put the plan together, build out the foundations, which I've done in a lot of places. And I think there's an element of VC investing very early, pre-seed and seed in companies where you get to do that. So there is definitely an overarching theme, but it does take a bit of time to understand what that is. But no, it was not intentional at all.
You've obviously been a founder before, which I always think is really helpful as an investor to have that lens and perspective. What were your biggest learnings from your founder experience, and how has that helped you as a VC today?
I don't know why I laugh at when, I guess I did found a few things, but I don't really call myself a founder, which is quite interesting. Oh my God, so many learning. So Cab Power was one, and then I did like a side hustle, which was Give a Damn Dating, which was basically dating in the real world for people who kind of give a shit about the world. And then VentureESG, if you want to call it another initiative. Cab Power I did on my own, and I would not advocate ever doing something alone. I think you really need to bring people in on the journey. It makes you balances out the highs and lows. It makes the day-to-day so much more enjoyable, and it makes you more creative as a person, as a company. So that was a big learning. Would never do anything alone. Balancing out your skill sets and understanding how they fit. So my Give a Damn co-founder and I, it was a side hustle. We used to organize kind of really fun, curious events around London. She's a creative brain. She'd love putting together the event concept, and I was more of the operational person, maybe more of like the go-to-market, if you wanted to call it that, although we never did call it that, like the commercial chops. So I think understanding who you're building a business with, why you're building a business with them, how do you complement each other, how do you actually kind of allocate those roles in a business. I think looking at kind of investing in companies now, it's surprising how many founders don't necessarily do that at the outset and need a bit more of a steer. And then just having a community. It's going on the founder journey is incredibly tough. So having people that you can talk to, kind of be vulnerable with. I know that word's become a bit corny, but I think vulnerability and kind of authenticity on that journey is really key to kind of maintaining longevity of mental health.
100%. I would say being in a particularly one founder community has had a huge impact on me. Just, it's as much as about not feeling alone on the journey, not feeling like you're going crazy when you're up against, even if you can be at a totally different stage, there's a piece you get from just hearing people going through similar sorts of situations, and just sort of, it's almost like peer mentorship, but it's often like therapy. You just need to get it out. You need to talk it through, and it's so helpful. And I think particularly in the UK, there's an amazing willingness to support founders, from founders to founders. There's just great communities out there where it is really authentic and people do really care and they will go above and beyond for you and to check you're all right. And I think that is just quite powerful and really important to any founders listening to this, like me, who's a solo founder. And I totally hear what you said. I think it is very difficult to be a solo founder, and it is a lonely place, even though, I've got a wonderful team and I'm very lucky that over the years now, I don't have that same sort of feeling I had in the first few years. But even still, there are days where you are the brand, the sort of the buck stops with you a bit, and sometimes that pressure gets a bit too much. So sometimes it's great just to talk to others. Yeah, I wanted to talk about your route into VC because it is far from traditional. We alluded to that, and lots of people do go their kind of the banking route, or they might exit their startup and they get into investing that way. Can you talk us a bit about that transition? And I'd love to hear how you feel that you've experienced it differently based on your background and prior experiences, and what bits of that transition did you find most challenging or surprising perhaps? I'd love just to hear that, particularly for anyone else that might be going through that change at the moment.
Well, it's a really hard question because I think to some extent I don't necessarily still identify myself as being a VC. And I know that sounds crazy and it doesn't make any sense, but I feel like I haven't been doing it long enough yet. So as I said, I've done a lot of different things. I've built this kind of unique, wonky shaped network, which I'm very happy about. And I joined the board of LSE's Entrepreneurship Centre about 5 years ago. And they run accelerator programs. They have 12 innovation hubs globally. They've just set up a food and beverage program focused on F&B entrepreneurs. They do female founder programs. They run loads of things. I kind of got a front seat to seeing how the alumni ecosystem at LSE was growing, and how many founders there were there, how, what the success stories look like. And I kind of realized that there was something there. And then I got introduced to Veronica, who was setting up the fund. And to be honest, we had this chat and we ended up, it was an hour meeting. We ended up speaking for 3 hours and realized that there was something there and we wanted to work together. So I didn't go into that meeting being like, I'm going to join a VC. Went into this meeting thinking she's working on something really cool. I have no idea what it is really, but it sounds super fascinating. It sounds really unique in the UK market. She's obviously done some thinking around it and would love to learn more, and didn't even know there was a role there. So that's applied to a lot of my career. So it was less about it being a VC, if that makes sense, and more about the opportunity that we were tapping into. And then the path has obviously led me into being in a role, but I'm not sure that answers your question.
No. It's interesting. And I think it also lends itself to what you've always said, that you throw yourself into things. And I think your curiosity, which I think is just a good lesson for us all. Sometimes if you're curious and excited, willing to put yourself out there and have conversations with different people, it's quite amazing where that can lead, I think. Did you find when you started in VC a particular aspect that was much harder because, say, you didn't come from the traditional background? What was the hardest part of that transition?
One is mentally, psychologically. I have to constantly battle against this. It's really hard. The whole industry it's full of very successful people and of people who have had this very, I want to say, a little bit of a standard path. And it's hard to look at your background and actually put yourself on an even level with them, to say my background is as valid or it's as good, because the whole industry doesn't really recognize that. So actually, I've had to do a lot of work in looking back and saying, actually, my background is valid and is good for this role and does work, and I do offer a lot of value. And the next thing is fundraising. So fundraising, obviously, Adam, my partner, was at Goldman, founded Scalable Capital, incredibly impressive background, lovely human, and he's the LSE Goldman Scalable Unicorn founder, white male, and it's hard. It's wonderful working with him, but sometimes it can be hard in the sense that people compare us. People look at me and say, "Oh, you're the nice and fluffy one. You're the warm and fluffy one." But Adam's the person who's going to give me the return. So fundraising can be brutal in that respect. But it, got highlighted the other day. I think on our old deck, we had Adam was defined as unicorn founder, something, and then mine was super connector with a moral compass. And this female LP said to us, I didn't really realize how you position yourself, but it doesn't sound good. So a lot of it is personal confidence and reflection, but the fundraising process constantly is someone kind of whipping you slightly.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, because that's a bit depressing still, isn't it? And I think, unfortunately, for many people, particularly female and underrepresented founders and investors, it's just a lot harder, right? And I think it's probably even harder for you because you have a non-traditional path. But I think what's clear from how far you've come is just the validity to your experience. And I think that's hopefully really helpful and inspiring for others that are kind of looking to break into VC.
And to what I said before about knowing your team and knowing how you fit and complement each other, I think you have to be really clear on that when you're setting up a fund, depending on your thesis. For us, community is central. Everything we do is plugging into the community, the way we get access, the way we support founders. That's what I love. Like, I get a dopamine hit from doing that side of things. That's why Adam and I make so much sense, because he's got his Goldman background, he's got his founder backgrounds. Like, it works with the two of us, and it may not work in that way with another individual, but for us, this partnership comes together. So you understand where you're adding value.
Love that. We're going to come on to talk a bit more specifically about Houghton Street Ventures in a minute, but can you share some advice just for anybody that's looking to move into VC right now that is coming from non-traditional backgrounds? What can they do to break through like you did?
Understand what you actually really want, why you want to go into VC. Speak to so many students or so many grads, but I really want to go into VC and I love working with companies. You're like, have you ever worked with a company before? I think, no, but I love startups.
Yeah. We get that a lot as well.
Figure out what you want to do, figure out what you're good at, figure out what you've done. Like, go work in a startup, get some operator experience, like understand where your skills are, where your value lies, and why you would make sense for this firm or a firm, like how you fit in, and build, I always say to people, if you want to be in the investor side of things, not on the platform side, like build a test portfolio, pick out the companies that you would have invested in, build a thesis for yourself. I think being very proactive, like trying to talk to people, have coffees. But I think as long as you show real interest, enthusiasm and knowledge, you'll be fine.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And I think there is a growing sort of momentum behind wanting to have different perspectives and greater diversity in VC. There's still not enough of that, but I hope there'll be more of it. And therefore, I think if you do those things you mentioned in terms of really thought it through, be clear on your value prop and your areas of expertise, be proactive, build relationships, listen, take feedback, all those sorts of things, show real passion for the space, then I think you'll definitely have a better chance than just try and get in because of daddy or mummy or friends.
Yeah, or the guy I worked with at the investment bank. It's interesting though, because when you list those things, they all sound very sensible. Like, they all sound very obvious, very simple things.
I think they are, but it's amazing. And this goes to job searching in general. It's amazing how many very talented people bomb at interviews because they either, unfortunately, arrogance slips in because they've always succeeded in everything they've done. They think moving from a corporate to a startup will be easy. Well, it's not, because it's very competitive and you have to do the work. You have to show. You've got to go above and beyond. And it's amazing, even at senior levels, even for exec searches that we run, it's amazing how many people fall down on very simple things, not having gone under the surface or the bonnet of a business to really understand the values and the strategy and the competition. Whereas often these things just take a bit of time and a bit of care. Coming on to Houghton Street Ventures then, you've been a partner since 2020. Can you tell us a bit more about the origin story, the sorts of investments you've made so far, how you assess founders? Just hear a bit more about how you do what you do and how it all came together.
So in the US, you probably know, like, lots of universities have alumni-focused funds. In the UK, no one does, funnily enough. Like, there are a few angel groups, but there's no fund kind of formally affiliated with the uni where that has this focus or thesis. So we essentially realized, unbeknownst to most people, that the LSE alumni base is really entrepreneurial. It's like more than 10%, so more than 25,000 alums have previously set up a business or are actively, so together, previously set up and shut down and actively. So it's huge. They produce 26 unicorns out there. Every year they raise between 3 and 500 million at seed. Last year was a bit lower. So overall, about just close to 4 billion venture funding, but loads of activity. And we just thought this is a really interesting thesis. We can get access to the founders through that, affinity. And once we've invested, we can plug them into this incredible, robust network, 250,000 people globally, every corner of the globe, every type of company, whether it's investment, talent, BD support, just advice, peer support, everything you need, it's in there somewhere. So we kind of put the proposal to the school and got the partnership agreement over the line, which took longer than we had anticipated. Working with a uni is much like working with a corporate. And we have this formal partnership agreement, which means that we, get a house on campus where I am now in the middle of London. We get to use the brand and logo. We get plugged into everything the uni does, whether it's the entrepreneurship centre, the faculty, the alumni engagement team. And we also commit a portion of our economics back to the university to support entrepreneurship activities, which, to coin one of Adam's terms from Goldman, is long-term greedy. If we kind of get students thinking about entrepreneurship now, then in 5-10 years when they leave, when they've left, in a Meta or an Amazon, they might then leave to found a business and come to us. Our focus is very much on alum. So not students, even though we do stuff with the student body, it's focused on alumni. So people who on average have been out of uni for about 8 to 10 years. And we have it's very kind of simple. As long as there's an LSE alum founder on the team, then we'll talk to you. We have a global mandate. We're generalists, so any kind of tech-enabled sectors. And we do small tickets, so 150 to 250K, pre-seed to late seed. And we've done 10 investments to date, 1 in India, 1 in Germany, 1 in the UK, 4 in the US, 1 in Canada, 1 in Brazil, and 1 in Colombia. So very regionally diverse and across kind of fintech, B2B SaaS, consumer social, brick and mortar, digital health, insurance.
Very broad then.
Yes, which is not to everyone's taste.
I love it. I think it's a really, as you said, in the US, this is massive. It feels criminal that we don't have more of this, and there's such an amazing pool of talent, in the alumni, that it makes total sense. What a cool partnership. And you've already described some of the great benefits that I guess students, alumni, the university, and yourselves can get from that kind of mutually beneficial partnership. There are going to be people hearing this that go, oh, I'm a LSE alum, I've got a good startup idea. So for anyone that falls into that category, when it comes to pitching to you and working with you guys, you and Adam as a VC partner, what are you looking for? What are the do's and don'ts? The things that grab your attention, and on the flip side, the red flags when pitching. Fill us in if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I would say any business you're building, come and talk to us. Even if it's not something that we'd invest in, we're here to kind of support and plug you into the ecosystem. So 100% come at us with everything you've got. But in terms of what we look for two buckets. So one is second-time founders. That's a portion of what we've invested in, people who've kind of been on this is not their first rodeo. But more than that, is people solving a problem that they really understand. Why have they struck upon this problem as something that they want to solve? Like, how have they had personal experience? Did they work in the industry where they were close to it? What makes them think that they are going to be able to beat everyone else to solving this problem? And is it a big problem? The kind of economics of our fund mean that we need to make a 50 times 100 return on every investment we make. So they need to be building a business in a big market, or that has the potential to expand into a big market. Not only do they know the problem, but do they understand that this is a problem? Can they demonstrate that this is a problem that is really being felt? So if it's, an enterprise SaaS, have they spoken to corporates? If it's for consumers, have they done their research? How much insight have they got? Often they're amazing ideas, but they're not necessarily fully validated. And whilst we don't necessarily need kind of traction per se, we do like to have some assurance or understanding that they've kind of proven that this is a real problem. We do speak to sole founders, and we've backed a few sole founders. So, kind of going against what I said before, but it really depends on the strength and, are they going to be able to bring in really, really strong talent? Well, lastly, we're not an impact fund, but we do want to see people building businesses, in which we can get onto later, kind of in the right way, or solving problems that are real in the world. We don't want to invest in businesses that are kind of propagating or reinforcing necessarily kind of bad habits. So we do kind of have that lens.
Great, thank you very much. Before we come on to talk about ESG, which is, I know, a topic of you're really passionate about, and it's very important. We've obviously touched upon fundraising there for founders pitching to you, but you've also had the unique experience of raising a first-time fund. So for anyone else that might be thinking about doing this themselves, do you mind sharing some of your lessons from that experience? Anything you do differently? And particularly, given that this is still sadly a very male-dominated industry, how your experience was raising as a woman in VC, because there might be other women out there that have maybe been put off by experiences so far. So any advice you could share there as well would be super helpful.
If we were to do this, what have we learned? Maybe I'll take that if we were to do this again, So one, you have to have a unique thesis. Like just as I said, for founders, why are they building this? Why are they kind of uniquely experiencing this? Or why do they have unique insight that's going to put them ahead of the rest? I think when you're building a fund, you need to understand what that is. Like, why are you going to be able to get access to the best founders out there? Why do they want to talk to you? Why do they want to take your money? Like, you can't underestimate the importance of that. And for us, that's the LSE affinity. So we get access to founders. But I think when you're creating a whole new thesis, you have to validate it, as I just said. So when we started fundraising, we had this on paper. We hadn't invested in any LSE businesses before we started. I mean, Adam had from his angel portfolio, but it wasn't really on the basis of the alum link. So we had on paper, this is what we think we can do. I think if we were to go again, we would have raised a small amount of money. So like the folks at Form Ventures, they raised a small, I think it was 100 million, and then invested that and then used that to raise their kind of first big fund. I think we would have done that, raised a small amount of money, invested in kind of 10 businesses and used that as an example, a case study of who we can get access to, who we can invest alongside, how we can support them. And that would have helped pull the story together so much more effectively. It's very hard if you're starting straight out of the gates with no venture experience to kind of build a strong narrative on the basis of paper. And then lots of things, but you've got to have confidence. Everything you're doing, you've got to believe in it. There's an element of pretending. We're still, is it pretending? Is that the right word? We've only been investing for a year. So again, someone said, someone said to me the other day, I hear it's going really well. And I was like, how are we defining well? What does well mean? We've got a little bit of money and we're investing it. I know.
Well, there's such a long cycle
I know.
Isn't there? Yeah, it's so hard to, I guess, often know until you've seen those returns. But I guess you get some good signals, don't you, as to how it's going. But yeah.
And I've become a strong believer in the fact that I think lots of people don't necessarily understand what it's like to set up a fund from the get-go and to work in this world. It's very bitty. It's quite a lot of context switching. You're doing lots of different things. It's kind of, you have to be an uber generalist and you have to love that. And you have to thrive and be driven by the small wins. So as you said, the feedback loops are so long that if you're waiting for that markup or whatever, you're going to be here a long time. So you have to really get a hit from getting on a call with a founder and being able to have a great conversation and support them for an hour, or connecting them to their lead Series A investor, or connecting them to whoever. Like, you have to be driven by those things in order to make this, I think, to want to get up every day and do it. And I think some people don't necessarily realize that.
Mm. And did you feel that as a woman, it was a different experience to a male raising a first-time fund?
So I don't have the experience of being a white man, so I can't compare. It's a lot of the soft, subtle bits, the soft, subtle references and being in a meeting and someone speaking to Adam. There are some specific stories, like the fluffy, warm, fluffy, things like that, comments. But I don't know what it's like, some people, Adam gets more responses on LinkedIn than I do from people, but there are many reasons for that. And it's not just the fact that he's a man. I think sometimes you need to not think about gender in this. It doesn't help to focus too much on gender. It can be quite dispiriting.
Fair enough. That's good advice. Hannah, at the end of 2020, you also co-founded VentureESG, which is a brilliant initiative that I'd love our listeners to learn a bit more about if they haven't already heard about it. So tell us why you decided to start it and what's the impact you're having with it.
So as I said, we're not an impact fund, but we were looking at some of the companies. We were setting up Houghton Street Ventures. We were looking at some of the companies that had come out of the alumni base, and Allbirds, it's not a great example now, but Allbirds. And some of these businesses were not impact businesses, but had kind of looked like they had built sustainability and responsibility into the core of their operations and what they stood for. And we were like, how can we operationalize that in our fund? LSE at the same time had given us, I think, an ESG policy. And we were like, this is crazy. This is not this isn't what it should be. So we started talking to other funds to see what they were doing. And, most response we got was, what's ESG? What do you mean by that? Do you mean an exclusions list? And a few funds had kind of been working on things, but not really. So it seemed in the industry like no one was really talking about it. And at the same time, there was the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. Some of the big tech companies had not been operating in kind of a very responsible way. Some of the VCs had Me Too issues, and there seemed to be a wave happening. So we got a small group of we thought, right, well, we'll define an ESG framework for ourselves. And we did this with Mercury. So Ginny and Denise from Mercury, which is the fund that's backed by the Scott Trust. So we came together with them. And then Johannes, who's now my kind of co-founder and co-director at VentureESG, who's an academic at Cambridge, who'd written about kind of ethics. He was the only guy online who I could see writing anything on tech ethics. And we came together to define and put together this ESG framework for venture. And we had about 20 funds around the table to help us with that, and pulled in founders and lawyers and subject matter experts. And by middle of 2021, there was a lot of interest, and we were doing community calls and some events. And we thought, right, let's turn this into something proper. So that's when we spun out VentureESG. And as an entity, we support VC funds, so mainstream VC funds and impact, but not ESG funds, or not funds just investing in sustainability. So every type of fund, emerging, established, investing in all different regions and all different sectors. And we have a community of LPs, and we essentially support them with kind of understanding what ESG is, what it means for the way that their funds operate and how they invest. So we provide expert events, we put together specific fit for purpose resources and tools, and we do training. And we now have a community of about 550 VCs and about 100 LPs.
Wow. That is amazing. Congratulations on the impact you've had in a really short space of time. I think VC is often perceived as a very competitive environment where more often than not funds compete against each other rather than collaborating. Now, I know that isn't always the case. There's lots of co-investing and stuff, but there is a competitive spirit perhaps amongst some funds. So you've partnered with so many different VCs here to create and test the ESG framework. So can you tell us a bit more about that collaboration and how it came about, and why that should be probably something we should to focus more on and do more of?
Yeah, I mean, I really love this question because I always talk about this. I always say that it's been such a unique glimpse into the VC world, that everyone's so collaborative, and it's so true. And I think the main reason is because kind of being more sustainable and inclusive and responsible in how you operate as a fund, or how you invest and how you support companies, is not a competitive differentiator. You know, we should all be doing this. It should become, we think, a license to operate in a number of years. If you're not doing this, then you actually shouldn't get funding. Like, that should be it. If you're not treating your employees right, why should anyone give you money? So actually, I think that's been recognized. So because it's not a competitive differentiator, people are really happy to help each other. And if they believe in, if you want to use the term bettering society, which I don't really like that term, but I think if you are integrating this to have a positive impact on the world and on people and the planet, then you want to maximize that. You don't want to just limit that for your portfolio. You want to kind of see that happen at scale. So I think people are very happy to, and we see it every day, you know, people will be looking at, you know, how do I roll out this reporting function? And so we're like, oh, we'll get on a call and discuss it. Happy to make time. So the generosity within the community is kind of continually astounding.
Love that. And before we get to our 3 wrap-up questions, for any VCs listening to this that are kind of thinking, right, I need to think more about ESG in 2024 and beyond, what is your advice for them? And what does the future look like for ESG in VC?
So I think if you're a VC thinking about this and you don't really know where to start, obviously give VentureESG a shout, or go on our website. Like, we have a cheat sheet for you. But also, before you start thinking about it in terms of your companies, think about it as a fund. Like, how are you operating? How are you sourcing and hiring on an inclusive basis? How are you treating your employees? You know, do you have an internal code of conduct? Are you measuring your carbon footprint when you're flying left and right and center to board meetings and conferences? You know, think about things for your own fund first. We always say, like, you need to walk the walk before you start asking things of your companies. So, and also it gives you a good understanding of what it means to integrate a lot of this, how hard and easy it is. Where is ESG going? It's a tough one, right? Like, ESG in the public markets is taking a bit of a bashing, but we don't think it's going anywhere in private markets and in venture, which I think is a good thing. LPs are increasingly requiring it. Regulation has come in. So I think we're still seeing people adopt it. In the US, there might be what you call now green hushing. So people doing it, but not talking about it. But I think it's here to stay. So I'm bullish on ESG.
Long may that continue. Good to hear. Hannah, it's been an absolute pleasure. We're going to do our 3 wrap-up questions, but I've really enjoyed our conversation. What is the best piece of career advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with as we kick off 2024?
Have confidence in yourself. Be your best advocate. And then the next one, which I don't think is very popular, don't be afraid of quitting. Like quitting is okay. Like quit. Like sometimes you need that clean break to go on to the next thing. And there's doors, I believe doors rarely shut. Doors rarely close forever.
Love that. Thanks, Hannah. What are you personally and professionally most excited about in 2024?
Closing our fund, being able to invest in more fantastic founders, thanks. I'm really seeing VentureESG is growing. We're going to be doing a lot more in the US. Actually seeing funds implement real work and take action. And then we're hosting a conference in September, which is the first of its kind for ESG and venture capital. And so very excited to bring people together. And before that, we're doing an emotional resilience workshop for emerging managers, which I would say is probably for myself, but I'm really excited to bring those conversations together.
Much needed, a really important topic that. Thank you. And finally, this is 40-Minute Mentor. So if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Can I cheat?
Go for it.
In the sense that I don't have a person, because I'm really bad at this. It's like when people say, you know, who do you want to invite for dinner, which 6 people, dead or alive. So I would say like someone outside of my industry, like a sportswoman, maybe a Serena Williams, like a sportswoman or an actress, people who are building careers in industries that have like similar dynamics in terms of like male, female, like where there's some ego. Like, I don't know. I feel like I would want someone who can understand and empathize what I'm going with, but from a different context.
Love that. That's a really good answer. Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a really fascinating one. You've achieved so much, and the impact you're having, you know, with both Houghton Street Ventures, but also around the ESG agenda in VC is incredible, and you really deserve all the success you're having. So thank you for coming on the podcast, and I wish you all the very best of luck with these exciting initiatives you have in the year ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's really like perked up my Friday morning. I'm energized now for the rest of the day.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Hannah.
Thank you.
And that is all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. We really hope you enjoyed it even half as much as we enjoyed recording it. If you're a new listener and haven't left us feedback before, we would really appreciate it if you did. We'd love to hear what you love most about 40-Minute Mentor and how you think we can make it even better. So if you have 30 seconds after this episode, I'd be so grateful if you could head to ratethispodcast.com/40mm and leave us a rating and review. You can also leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. As always, if we've left any questions unanswered in today's episode, or if you have any suggestions for future episodes, then please do let our head of marketing, Hannah, know. Thank you so much again for all your support, and I hope to see you next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.